And good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country or the globe today. My name is Danny Lee. I'm the marketing manager here at Lumeta. Today's webinar will be on the SANS Top 20 Critical Security Controls and the Lumeta Network Situational Awareness. So just a couple of housekeeping issues before we get started with today's webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat box down on the right-hand side on your GoToWebinar dialog box, and we'll try to get to those or get to as many as we can at the end of our webinar. Today's speakers, we have Matt Webster. Matt is our Chief Technology Officer, also, and David Lennon. He's our Director of Professional Services. And they will be going back and forth throughout the course of our discussion today. Just a real quick overview of who Lumeta is. We are the most widely deployed network situational awareness solution for large enterprises and government agencies. We have a patented security intelligence technology built on technology that first mapped the internet, and we have a long list of blue chip clients. Those would include RBS, Shell, Travelers, Walt Disney, just to name a few. So that's kind of just a quick high-level view of what we do. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to David Lennon, who's going to start kick it off and talk about the SANS Top 20 Critical Security Controls. David, over to you.
Great, Danny. Thanks very much. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. Wanted to start out just with a little bit of history, a little backstory on SANS and the critical controls. There have been a number of security standard frameworks developed over the years. However, many of these efforts have essentially become exercises in reporting on compliance, checking a box, demonstrating that something had been done, and have actually diverted security program resources from constantly evolving attacks that must be addressed. In response to this, in about 2008, a consortium of U.S. and international agencies came together, joined by experts from private industry around the globe. Ultimately, the recommendations that came out of this consortium are what became the critical security controls coordinated through the SANS Institute. This effort focuses on prioritizing security functions that are effective against the latest advanced targeted threats, with a strong emphasis on what works. Security controls where products, processes, architectures, and services are in use that have demonstrated real-world effectiveness. Standardization and automation were another top priority of this effort in order to gain operational efficiencies while also improving the effectiveness of the overall program. A key takeaway of this effort is that it is about implementation, not about reporting. It's about doing, not showing a paper-based compliance. In a survey conducted about the SANS critical security controls, 73% of respondents were aware of the controls and either have adopted or are planning to adopt. This is a great indicator of the resonance of this effort. The primary driver for adoption, according to survey respondents, is the desire to improve enterprise visibility. The premise being that in order to do, you must know. Visibility, in this case, leads to knowledge. Knowledge leads to power, and in this instance, having the power, having the knowledge driven from the visibility is key. Interestingly, the biggest impediment, according to the respondents, to adoption of these standards, and you may have guessed it, the so-called Layer 8, operational silos within IT organizations or between IT and other business units. This political overlay has been the biggest impediment, not a technology challenge, not a lack of solutions. So until this IT security is deemed to be mission critical, and frankly you just need to read the front page of the paper on any given day to see that the tide is beginning to turn, it does remain a challenge to successfully adopt these controls. Interestingly, while 73% are aware or have adopted, only 10% of respondents felt they've done a complete job of implementing the controls, which again demonstrates the challenge associated with truly implementing a robust security program. even with a framework as tight as the 20 critical security controls, even with a plethora of technologies available in the market. As part of this, SANS routinely solicits input from organizations that have had success implementing these controls, supporting a user vetting process of products and solutions that help meet specific controls. So SANS doesn't recommend these, but relies on the implementers, the organizations, the real-world clients who have implemented technologies to report back on successes they've had with a variety of products. So today we're going to talk about how Lumeta can address 7 of these specific security controls. And we'll go through each one of these in a little bit greater detail. And Matt and I will describe the control, talk about the relevance, and talk about some case studies and client use cases that represent how our solutions can be effective for each of these controls. So begin at the beginning, as they say. Critical control number 1, the inventory of authorized and unauthorized devices. The intent of this control is to reduce the ability of attackers to find and exploit unauthorized and unprotected systems. So Lumeta helps here with the discovery and mapping of the entire global enterprise, your layer 2 and layer 3 topologies all the way down to the endpoint, to identify any and all unknown, unauthorized networks, connections, and devices. And it truly is these UNs, as we often refer to them, the unknown, unauthorized, unsecured, unmanaged, unpatched devices that represent the low-hanging fruit for an attacker, if you will, the most easily accessible threat vector. If you don't know about it, you don't manage it, and you haven't secured it. If it's unauthorized and it's on your network, it's not part of your practice to patch it and continue to vulnerability manage it, for example. And arguably most important is to take this data that we collect through our solutions and extend them downstream to security solutions for remediation of any issues that are found, up to and including severing ties, removing from the environment those devices deemed to be unauthorized. And as indicated, Lumeta is a user-vetted solution for critical control number 1. Matt, I'd like to ask you, if you would, to go ahead and talk a little bit about some case studies around this control.
Sure. Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. So what we really focus on when we talk about control number 1 is kind of the fundamental use case study for the Lumeta product suite. Over the years, and I've been here 10 years, we have continued to study and research how our clients understand and are managing their environments. The numbers have held true throughout the decade that I've been here, that there tends to be approximately a 20% gap in what we'll call enterprise visibility, knowledge about the enterprise. And what I've grabbed for today's conversation are 4 examples from different market sectors, government, manufacturing, financial, and technology, highlighting how there was this fundamental or foundational gap of intelligence. As David has pointed out, because of that gap and due to that gap, these organizations, prior to utilizing Lumeta solutions, may have had an extreme vulnerability, low-hanging fruit, to use Dave's analogy, on what devices may be vulnerable. And as you can see here from this table, there's an example of an assumed device count. These various organizations assumed they had anywhere from 100 or 60,000 devices up to 800,000 devices across their enterprise. And what we really mean by that is what they considered, quote unquote, in scope for vulnerability scanning and for protecting. Through Lumeta solutions, they were able to uncover, again, a gap of intelligence, a gap of knowledge, that a hole in the foundation, so to speak. That gap ranges anywhere from, say, 10% up in excess of 20% knowledge. So picking an example out of this list, the manufacturing company that you see here assumed they had about 60,000 devices, when in reality they had 89,000 devices. Now, this goes beyond just the device itself and being able to discover that it exists. There's a component of this that is highly reliant on understanding the enterprise itself, understanding the network. Are there networks, are there parts of the organization that they are not seeing, that they're not scanning, that they're not protecting. I think these numbers bear out exactly what we are seeing across the industry.
And Matt, an important note here is that across the board, and this is really true for our entire client base, that established vulnerability management programs were in place at all of these.
Sure.
And that's not to suggest that they aren't truly capable products, that they aren't a robust program, but it highlights the fact that the foundational intelligence provided, that gap in visibility is a true differentiator, and that existing vulnerability management solutions are augmented by this additional visibility.
And then there's not just vulnerability management solutions, but also asset management solutions, just discovery solutions in general. It's simply not enough.
So speaking of vulnerability management, moving on to critical control number 4, continuous vulnerability assessment and remediation. Again, the definition of this being to regularly run automated vulnerability scanning tools against all, I emphasize all, systems and quickly remediate any vulnerabilities within critical problems within 48 hours. And again, 48 hours for some may be considered plenty of time. For others, it may be considered not frequently enough. But the point is to constantly be on top and remediating this situation. So Lumeta helps there by validating that remediation steps are effective upon implementation. So it's not enough to just take steps. You need to ensure that the steps you've taken have been effective. Continuously sweep the network. Be proactive rather than reactive. Know what's going on all the time. And to, again, as we discussed in our first case study, discover devices in the enterprise that are routinely missed by vulnerability assessment programs.
And speaking directly to that, we have a recent case study. This is a client that we've engaged with in the last couple of months, correct, David?
Yes.
They approximated about 100,000 connected devices that they had part of their vulnerability management program. Through some iterative efforts with the Lumeta product suite, they were able to uncover in excess of 16,000 devices that should have been incorporated in their overall program. Certainly, the client realized immediate improvement in their overall security posture simply by understanding and gathering that knowledge of what's truly in their environment. But this also revealed a number of process deficiencies, so to speak, deficiencies in how they were categorizing devices that should be incorporated in their programs, how they were allowing exceptions within their environment for devices that should be brought into the fold and be properly vulnerability scanned, et cetera. Important point here, and David mentioned it earlier, providing this information up to other solutions, in this particular case, vulnerability scanners, is a critical point. Integration and automation to deliver the SANS security controls can't be emphasized enough. Simply discovering these devices is a step in the right direction, but let's leverage automation to integrate that information into other solutions.
Right, and again, it comes back to what you said, that these devices, if they are out of scope, if they're out of your visibility, and again, the primary driver for adoption of controls is visibility. If you don't see them, you can't secure them. Absolutely. So making sure that you have that enterprise-wide visibility. So moving on, critical control number 10, secure configurations for network devices such as firewalls, routers, and switches. And again, the intent here is to preclude those electronic holes from forming at connection points with the internet, with other organizations, or even within the organization, within the enterprise, across internal network segments. Lumeta helps here directly by discovering routers with connectivity to unknown and unauthorized network segments. Really, again, truly understanding the breadth of the connected enterprise, ensuring that you are clear about the connectivity points between, whether it's the soft GUI middle and the hard crunchy shell, or the layers and layers and layers of defenses that you have. If you aren't clear on the connection points between these internal network segments, between your internal and external, you are at risk for allowing these electronic holes, as SANS defines them, to be formed. Testing for misconfigured perimeter devices, ensuring that devices that are at the edge of your network are doing what they're supposed to do. And in addition, locating rogue v6 enablement. Any network kit that you've acquired in the last 10 years probably is not just V6 capable, but arguably prefers to talk that way, out of the box. So understanding that is an important piece as well.
Although this case study, I want to grab a point that you just brought up.
Sure.
The case study is really focused on understanding the edge of your environment, where you leave your secure, protected enclaves or enterprise and exit that environment to partners or the internet. I do also want to briefly mention the IPv6 quandary, so to speak.
Yeah.
As David mentioned, many devices, whether they be network infrastructure or the iPhones of the world, laptops of the world, prefer, and in many cases are anxious to talk IPv6. And unfortunately, without a methodology for understanding how you go about finding those devices, finding those connections, finding where IPv6 exists, we've heard from numerous other product companies and vendors in the world, and specifically at RSA last year, I heard the folks from Tenable and McAfee and Qualys, et cetera, talk about the V6 interface, so to speak, on your device is as vulnerable to malware, hacks, et cetera, as your IPv4 infrastructure. Unfortunately, you're not securing it because you don't know it even exists. But with that said, we certainly are known for our mapping and our visualization and our ability to uncover and highlight how you're interconnected with your partners, various business units, to the internet, et cetera. Understanding where you leave what you manage and secure and where you're connected to, or as we call it, the unknown, so to speak, is really a focus point of the IP Sonar and ESI products. Of course, you would want to implement the proper controls based on that knowledge, based on understanding where your defenses lie, where your perimeter is, where your edge exists, and of course make the appropriate steps to sever those connections where they are unauthorized.
Right. The key coming back to understanding, having that visibility, knowing where these connection points are, understanding how your network is providing connectivity between network segments is really the first step to having that understanding that you need. So, and that's a great bridge to Critical Control 11, the limitation and control of network ports, protocols, and services. It is described or defined as applying host-based firewalls and port filtering and scanning tools to block traffic that is not explicitly allowed. In order to block the traffic, you must, of course, understand what the traffic is. You must understand how it traverses your network. How is your network providing the ability for the devices within and without to communicate? So Lumeta helps here by performing a multi-protocol discovery to map and visually show how this protocol reach exists across the enterprise, from segment to segment, from intranet to extranet, et cetera, and allows you to rapidly scan thousands, tens of thousands of devices across millions of potential IP addresses to identify these vulnerable and infectious service ports. And again, Lumeta is user vetted for this control number 11.
So Critical Control 11, use case, as David mentioned, we are a user-vetted product in this space. This is fundamentally a picture is worth 1,000 words. Understanding how traffic is traversing your enterprise is knowledge. Making sure you have the proper security controls in your enterprise, not just at the endpoint, but the enterprise itself, how that traffic can traverse, where can controls be put into place to properly secure, to properly protect your environment based on malicious type traffic, based on policy. This also leads itself to proper endpoint configuration. So putting these controls in place in your enterprise, in the network itself, I should say, allows you to really understand more richly and deeply how those endpoints interact and are talking across various protocols and packets. This control, this understanding of how the traffic is mapped across your environment certainly gives you that picture so you can put those proper security controls into place.
Yeah, and interestingly, this control specifically talks about host-based firewalls and port filtering, talking about the endpoint management and security thereof to prevent ports and services from doing what they're supposed to do. But Matt, your point is well made that ultimately it's the network that provides this communication. Absolutely. And if you aren't doing the same effort to understand how traffic passes on the network, then you're missing a key piece of this. Right. That's really where the...
Well, and to that end, if you don't have the ability to lock down machines within your enterprise, you have guest networks or contractors coming in that maybe you don't have ultimate control over, how can you block them, or how can you put in host-based firewall to protect those devices? Have the infrastructure be that backstop to the overall security of your enterprise.
Yeah, and it comes back to the controls we talked about prior, the connectivity of understanding the devices, Absolutely. Understanding where you leave that which you can manage, that which you can secure and control, to that which you cannot, or choose not to in the case of a guest network, etc. So moving on to critical control number 12, the controlled use of administrative privileges. Again, the spirit here to protect and validate that administrative accounts on desktops, laptops, and servers, and I would add routers and switches and firewalls, etc., are enabled appropriately to prevent common types of attacks. So Lumeta helps here by discovering commonly used and easily guessed SNMP strings or legacy strings, strings based on a routine that turns them over across the enterprise, that legacy strings, while authorized a month ago, are not still in use on particular devices. And understanding how, again, the network itself demonstrates the connectivity at layer 2 and layer 3 of these particular devices.
So a common use case for our clients to deliver on CSC 12, although we are a credentialless product, so to speak, we don't interact with WMI or SSH, we do look at network infrastructure to understand what type of passwords, SNMP passwords, or community strings that those devices may answer to. We've had numerous clients tell us that by gaining access to SNMP, an unauthorized access via SNMP, gives you ultimate and fundamental control to, as David pointed out, firewalls and layer 3 switches and routers that lend itself to creating a gap in the infrastructure. If I have that simple network management protocol ability to change a configuration and access network kit, I can create a hole on my own to attack an environment. Certainly, validation of these policies and controls are in place in your infrastructure is something that the Lumeta products we can deliver on.
Critical control 13, boundary defense, edge defense, perimeter defense. You almost pick your term, but the idea is understanding, and as defined by this control, controlling the flow of traffic through network borders and policing the content by looking for attacks and evidence of compromised machines. Again, helping with identifying critical perimeter or network edge devices. If it handles traffic, if it controls, if it's a gateway to the inside from the outside, if it is a key point between a DMZ and the inside, between a high secure and a low secure network, you have to understand what it's doing, the traffic that's passing through it, as we've talked about to this point. Documenting these gateways, not just external, all gateways, between all classifications of network, inside to outside, outside to partner, outside to client, etc. And looking for inbound and outbound network leaks, as we refer to them. Again, validating that these secure zones are doing what you're intending them to do.
So when we talk about this, and I'm going to talk specifics here as, from a product suite perspective as a client use case is concerned. We have some technology built into our solution that's very unique to Lumeta. Many of you on the phone would certainly know it as leak discovery and what we call enhanced perimeter discovery, singularly focused on two things. Finding those uns, as David likes to call them, the uns, the unauthorized, the unsecure, the unknown connections to and from a secure zone, whether that be a secure enclave on the inside of your network, between network classifications, or between your infrastructure itself, your network, and the internet and your partners. Lumeta's products provide a unique capability, this network leak discovery, as we call it, to determine whether connections exist that could be utilized for data exfiltration. Certainly, we are not testing whether some financial document is making it out of your a well-defined gateway or an unauthorized gateway to the internet. But what we are able to tell you is whether the network is supporting that type of communication. So there are these UNs. And of course, as it was originally developed, was to really describe and understand risky misconfigurations, so to speak. Firewalls and routers and VPNs that aren't properly configured, that aren't adhering to best practices on how traffic should traverse your edge or your perimeter or boundary of your network.
Yeah, and actually going to a point you made about looking at, for example, a financial document exiting the network, it brings up the topic of data leak prevention. Right?
Sure.
It's a big topic, but it encompasses a number of things. If I walk into the CFO's office and pick up a file and walk out the door, that's data leakage. And outside of physical security, there's very limited ways to understand that. So it's important to understand that data leak prevention is a huge piece. But the point you made, Matt, about understanding about the network's ability to support data leaking, understanding where you've got misconfigurations at the perimeter, you've got unknown connections that would facilitate data exfiltration is absolutely critical to understanding and securing those and severing the ties that shouldn't be in existence.
Can we just pause for a brief moment there?
Sure.
One of the important points is we talk to a lot of organizations that have DLP solutions at the edge of their network. They're doing the right things, without question. The problem to that is in those areas of the environment that don't have the DLP solutions put into place, that aren't, you can only secure what you know about. If you don't know the connection exists, there's no way to put a security process or procedure or product in place to find those types of incidents where data may be leaking the environment.
Well, and it comes back to control number one, an inventory of unauthorized and authorized, a complete inventory of everything. And it's not just devices, it's connections, it's networks.
Absolutely. That's why it's foundational.
Foundational, without question. So bringing us to critical control 19, secure network engineering. And this talks about deploying a network architecture with at least 3 tiers, DMZ, middleware, and private network, again, as defined in this control. But it's, the premise is a defense in depth strategy, building and designing and building a network architecture that allows you to protect the things that are critical. And where you need to have access for guests in a guest network, where you need customer extranet access or partners, et cetera, you have a network that is designed to do that. And only that you've investigated the perimeter devices between these and ensure that your defense in depth strategy is actually implemented as you designed it. Identifying these highly connected or critical assets to ensure that defenses are commensurate with the sensitivity that these assets provide. The recipe for Coca-Cola is not sitting in a client, in an extranet somewhere. It's not in a guest network. It's behind 10 locked doors. It's in a network space where it is protected. Your critical information has to be treated as such. And again, confirming that secure zones, such as classified networks and the various levels of classification, are indeed secured. If they are supposed to be air-gapped, ensure that they are air-gapped, that there aren't unauthorized connections. However benign in their intent, if the connectivity shouldn't exist, make sure that you understand it so that you can sever it.
So this is, although we're not user vetted in this particular space, I would argue that this area is one of the critical pieces for the Lumeta product suite and how we can help our clients in understanding this defense in depth, or what does SANS call it, the 3-tier architecture.
Well, at least 3 tiers.
At least,
as you said, it's as what you deem to be the appropriate defense in depth strategy for your organization.
Absolutely. So certainly, understanding that those controls are in place, that you have a DMZ, you have an edge, you have some middleware, and then you have your GUI middle of the network, as David calls it. It makes sense. It's very straightforward. We all get that. But what we've learned over the years, we being Lumeta, is networks are changing so rapidly now. Business is driving the enterprise, driving what all of you are doing on a daily basis, maybe not with security first in mind. So understanding the impact of that change and how the network is morphing and potentially becoming more vulnerable or less secure associated with that change is something that you have to do either continuously or in real time. And that's where our ability to find how networks are interconnected is salient. It's critical. It kind of, although these are, the critical controls are a list, it's really very circular.
Oh,
You pass through and then start over. It's all about foundational information driving through all of the critical controls, whether Lumeta can address them directly or not.
right. No, absolutely. It's a great point. And you really can't stress enough the impact of change. Change is occurring in your network environment all the time, every minute of every day. When you add the idea of virtualization, when you add the extended network into the cloud, change can be done even more immediately and with less visibility than is critical to make the security decisions that you need to make. So that really sums that up. What I'd like to kind of close with, if I might, is to talk about how we deliver this foundational intelligence. We use that term foundational. The NSA used that term foundational to describe the first piece of this, critical control number one, how that foundational intelligence supports the implementation of critical controls. And Matt, as you said, they may be numbered sequentially, but it isn't start at 1, get to 20, and you're done. It is really a life cycle. It's something you have to be doing all the time, every day. To really drive that network situational awareness, the ability to say at any given time, I know what's going on in my network. I know what traffic is passing. I know what gateways exist. I know what devices have been spun up in that cloud infrastructure that I just extended my enterprise to really get you that, close that gap, that 10%, 20%. I mean, frankly, if it's 1%, if there's something you don't know, it puts you at risk until you can remediate it or sever ties to it. Really, the point being that you can get that confidence and trust that has been, what our clients, our long-standing clients in both government and infrastructure, or in the corporate world, have relied on for over a decade, so that they can trust their network to do the business and move at the speed of business, Matt, as you described. So, Danny, with that?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Matt. We're going to do some Q&A right now, and we do have several questions that people have posted. So let me begin. I'll throw it out to Matt and David. What other products does Lumeta integrate with, as far as vulnerability management or et cetera?
Yeah, I can start with the sky's the limit, arguably. I mean, we talked about in a number of these use cases the extending of the data to vulnerability management. It's one of the most prevalent use cases we have across our client base, from private sector to government. But it doesn't end there. It's not just enough to extend to vulnerability management, but to IP address management. When you're in charge of, as every organization arguably is, a Class A of space, how is that space utilized? Get that to IP address management. Taking that critical control one, the authorized inventory, that which you allow on your network, and manage it in an IT asset management solution. So extending that knowledge to IP address management, IT asset management, SIM, GRC,
network management, that foundational intelligence. The use cases for our clients are very broad, as David has pointed out. It goes beyond just what SANS is defined as the critical controls, and really moves into a world, an ecosystem of foundational intelligence being spun up across the entire enterprise, so that organizations are working with the most clear set of facts. With that said, as way of an example, we talk about vulnerability management. We've certainly, we announced in December a technology alliance with Tripwire, and we have developed a integration and automation with their IP360 product. It's Tripwire acquired Encircle, I guess last year or the year before. IP360 product, we're feeding that foundational intelligence up to the IP360 product, so that it can do its magic and work in a way that the organizations that are the vulnerability people of the world understand that those products are looking at what is the reality of the environment. We didn't mention it earlier. It's certainly not a failing of the vulnerability scanners.
No, that's a key point.
Or the program per se. It's just again, going back to that 20% gap of visibility and knowledge that every organization seems to have. the products that you put into place to deliver these controls are as susceptible to that gap of knowledge as the organization itself.
They're only as good as what they're looking at.
Absolutely.
And if they're not being told about everything, they're being tremendously effective on less than everything they need.
That's right.
And that really, again, to your point, not a failing of the product. It's that gap in visibility that we're closing.
From an analogy standpoint, maybe I shouldn't use it. It's probably bad. You can laugh at me if you think. It's like putting the best security system in your house, whomever that vendor might be, but securing the windows and your basement windows, etc. But if you don't know about the garage door and the garage, or you're not putting the security controls in place, I would argue that somebody that wants to rob your house is going to look for those places where you haven't put in the proper security controls.
Yes, that's a home network leak right there.
That's a home network leak.
Unauthorized ingress.
That's right.
Egress.
We'll get Gartner to write about that.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. We have another question. How is your solution deployed? So how is Lumeta deployed?
Right. So I'll kick that off, and you can add some color. We've really been talking about two different products when we reference the Lumeta solution. There is what most of you are probably aware of on the phone, the Lumeta IP Sonar product that we've been delivering to clients for about 10 years. It's an on-demand scanner that our clients are running from anywhere from a daily basis to every other day to every week, maybe every week coming out of a change weekend, monthly, quarterly. It's that on-demand knowledge, that sync up of what is my reality at this given moment. We announced middle of last year, I should say, middle of 2013, the Lumeta ESI product, which changes that on-demand flavor to real time. We have many organizations that have been asking for our help in providing that intelligence, the foundational intelligence to them in real time. And what we've done with that technology is take it beyond just scanning to incorporate some listening techniques that allow us to provide intelligence up to our clients in real time and integration with other products in real time.
Yeah, and actually that evolution, if you will, of moving from the snapshot to the video, the point in time to what I like to call all the time, mirrors this approach that we're seeing from a security framework perspective, where it's not enough to check it every couple of days, weeks, or months. You need to be checking it all the time. And so being able to do this via ESI, for example, all the time is critical. An extension further about talking about deployment is all the way, from as simple as a point-in-time audit, come in, take a snapshot, go away, through the idea of a subscription model, provided whether on premises or via the cloud, as well as full enterprise deployments in the enterprise, on premises, via hardware, via virtualized appliances, etc.
Great. Thanks, David. Sure. We have another one. Do you support TNC? If not, how do you respond to unauthorized?
David's smiling on this end of the phone. Lumeta has been a participant in the Trusted Computing Group for a number of years, I think 6 to be exact. We were asked by Juniper and Infoblox to participate in the Trusted Computing Group, specifically with Trusted Network Connect, or TNC. They saw our foundational knowledge as integral to the overall TNC architecture. We adopted a specification called IFMAP, MAP standing for Metadata Access Point. It's an ability for us in a standardized manner, not using APIs or any custom-built connectors, to provide relevant information up to a security architecture. The common kind of base cases or use cases that we demonstrate with TNC is what we would call post-authorization policy check. So as an example, a device, David's laptop, comes onto the network. It's certainly being checked for, does it have the right level of patches? Has it been vulnerabilities? Whatever it might be, we perform, let's say, leak discovery on it. Does it have an alternative connection to and from the environment? And if so, we report that up through IFMAP, the TNC architecture, and allow the TNC component to make decisions or policy decisions based on that device's behavior and potentially sever it from the network, or put it in remediation VLAN, whatever it might be, but take automated action.
Yeah. I mean, security automation through an open standard.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's not to like?
I love it.
It's great.
Great. I think we have time for one more who's like to finish up at the quarter of the hour. So our last question for today, and by the way, if we didn't get a chance to answer your question on the live webinar, we will be getting back to you via email. Okay, just so everybody knows that. Last question is not really a question; it's kind of a comment. This person's biggest challenge is making sure what they know in their network, and how do they, they're not. I'm trying to kind of rephrase it. Sorry, folks. Yeah. Their biggest challenge is making sure what they know is valid on their network, and what would they recommend? What would we recommend? To kind of accomplish that. So
the concern being that they're not sure they know about everything on their environment. Well,
right.
Rest assured, you're not alone. I mean, our decade in business, our extensive client list is proof positive, as well as the the long-standing deployments of our technologies, that it is very difficult to make sure that you have at any moment, and arguably all the time, a full understanding, a baseline, a foundational, if we've overused the term, I'll continue to do so, understanding of that in your enterprise. I mean, it is the biggest challenge by far.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen over the years that problem shift from 8-9 years ago. It wasn't so much the gap of knowledge wasn't because networks changed so rapidly. It was there weren't processes and products and solutions and policies to address that gap of knowledge. Now, through SANS as an example, that need for that foundational intelligence is on everyone's mind. Right? Now the problem is that the network and how the network can change and morph on a daily basis, whether it be through those programs like BYOD or cloudification of things. That the complexity, the numbers are the same, 20% gap of visibility.
Worn out, yep.
But the problem has changed.
Yeah.
IT is easy to stand up things that are bad, and understanding where those things are is certainly a challenge that we all have.
Yeah, and it's easier now than ever. I mean, as you mentioned,
Absolutely.
Virtualization, spin it up, turn it down. How do you know at any given time that you're aware of everything on the network? You've got to be on it all the time.
There was a recommendation part to that question, albeit a Lumeta webinar here. Certainly, we would recommend Lumeta products to help close that gap. But certainly, adopting the SANS methodology and mentality and mantra would also help address that problem.
There's a reason that this has the resonance that it does. That this program has the staying power that it does. It makes sense.
Right.
It's a nice, not a simple way, but a simplified way to look at an intelligent approach, a security framework that actually works.
Right.
And we started it with number one, which is understanding what you have. Coming back to that, the questioner's primary concern: how do you know what you have? Go find it. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time today, and everybody who's on the phone. Again, if you have any questions after the webinar, please feel free to email us at info@lumeta.com. And if you've asked some questions that are appear online that we have not been able to get to yet, we'll be getting back to you via email. So at that point, or at this time, we'll close out the webinar. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.